Gear Club, Episode 3. In this first part of a two-part series, Grammy-winning producer, engineer, artist, and owner of the famed magic shop, Steve Rosenthal guides us through a journey of his life and times. And later, the guys talk about tracking hit records on some of their favorite analog gear.
I mean, I'm trying to do a fucking podcast here. I don't know what to tell you. What's going on? I was just in the middle of some deep audio shit.
You guys are?
Yes.
Well, that is thrilling.
It is thrilling, honey. Anything else before I hang up on you? Okay.
Welcome to Gear Club, the podcast that claims to be about the art of recording, but it's really about nothing. It will require total concentration due to the intense information that will be spewed forth by Stewie, Johnny, and their illustrious guests. And without further ado, here's Johnny and Stewie.
Hey, Johnny.
Hey, Stewie.
Good to see you, buddy.
Dude, it's the best.
Oh, man, you are the best.
No, you're the best.
Okay, let's get it on.
Let's do this.
Okay.
But I'm mixing another band from Toronto called Little Junior, who I tracked it up there. We got together, I think, right before I went to Toronto.
Yes.
And I was flying up there, and it was like fast, like 10-day, 12-day record. And I don't know if I told you the story about, they're great kids, and we really had a great time. But it's their first record, and I really wanted them to track it all live. And I think they weren't really prepared to do that. They didn't think they were going to do it.
But they had played it as a band.
Well, they had just come off a 3-week tour, so I asked them, what did they do live? Did they play drums and bass first and then have the guitar players come out and do it later? And they totally were like, you're an asshole.
You're a complete ball bust.
But no, we set them up. We set them up live, and it was great. And, you know, we had we had an amp in, like, the corridor. We had an amp, like, down in the vestibule down the hallway. And they played great. And, you know, we were able to track the entire record in like 10 days or 11 days, which was really wonderful. Their first record once again. So, you know, my point is, let's just get a really great representation, make it sound great. I mean, clearly they will make more records. And, you know, what you hope is that each record is better. But this one is great. So anyway, we're mixing it now this week. And
did they come down?
They came down. I didn't make them come down so much as suggest they come down, because originally I think I was just going to mix it and send it to them. And I kind of felt like their first record, they should be around the mixing.
Yeah.
And they're great kids. We all got along really great. There is a ball busting aspect to what I do with them, but it's kind of like a loving, friendly ball busting.
Are they staying at the studio?
They're staying at the studio, and they're really having a great time. In fact, the engineer from the place up in Toronto, the kid who engineered it with me, Calvin, he came down too because he wanted to just see what it was like to have it you know what I mean, to see it finished. And they're friends, so. But we're mixing, you know, like basically, it's like 5 days or like 10 songs, 5 days.
Are you mixing to tape?
Mixing to tape and mixing to, you know, I always go separate tape, separate digital, and then we give it to Greggy. And he usually uses the tape,
right? Like
95%.
Are you doing stems?
Always stems, dude. Instrumental, vocal up, vocal down, one extra version, like maybe snare up, snare down, bass up, bass down, and a TV mix. And then I do the complete stems. So what do you do? So that's what I'm doing. What are you doing?
Nothing. I'm going to take a nap. Smoking a blintz.
A bong and a blitz? Popping a pancake?
Oh, today I have our old buddies, Rick Chertoff and David Foreman.
Oh, nice.
A.K.A. Little Isidore. We're working on a Margot Bingham record that we're honing in on. And we're just going to finish up writing a few things and probably do some last touches on a couple of songs. Actually, it's good to know you, buddy. Oh, Steve Shelley's around.
He is at Muscle Shoals this week.
Son of a bitch.
I know, but when
because I think I need a drummer.
Today?
And he'd be perfect. Within the next couple of weeks.
Oh, okay. He's around. He's around starting, like I got him the week of the 12th, but he's around.
Okay, because I need a drum track and our drummer's on the road, so.
Who's your drummer?
Brian Griffin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Jamie McLean guy.
Yeah.
That's great. He's doing great, right?
He's doing great. I think he's out with Brandy Carlisle.
Amazing.
This is his gig.
That's amazing.
But he's a beautiful drummer.
Yeah.
We've used him on the whole record, and but I can't get them now. So.
Yes, that's what happens when they get really popular.
Exactly.
Can't get them.
It's our fault.
I know.
So I got to get Steve Shelley Berman on this thing.
So, all right. So you're writing. How does that work?
Well, mostly we're tweaking the final composition, and the way Rick and David work is they're very into revisions. They're into writing revisions. Not that they're into it, but they are constantly mostly rewriting lyrics. In the case of
so you're doing lyric.
Yeah, but I'm not involved in that. I just
Right.
sit around and drink coffee when they do that. But in terms of the music, as the lyrics change, oftentimes we'll change the structure of the song. So that's a lot on me. And it's not just editing, it's a lot. I do a lot of playing on this stuff.
Right.
Initially to get the stuff together, and then we'll bring in who we think are the most appropriate players after I kind of do my thing to it. And David
You
plays
playing through
also.
like a click or a drum machine or a
It
shaker? Or?
No, we usually go out and put a real drum thing on. Rick will go out. Rick's a drummer, so he'll go out and play like a groove. Then we'll build on
Chertoff
that.
will groove on the drums?
He does, yeah.
Wow, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, that's his
incredible.
instrument.
Really?
Yeah, he's good. But
Wow. That's so funny.
and I remember him from the very first Robert Klein record. There's 2 songs on
Get
there,
outta
Child of
here.
the 50s, and he played drums on them.
Rick Chertoff.
Yeah,
The guy I assisted for in most of the 80s.
correct.
That's insane. He played on a Robert Klein record.
Yep,
That's a great record.
it is a great record. It's one of my
Wow.
favorite comedy
Okay,
records.
so Rick will play drums. Do you jam live with him or?
No, but mostly, and David's like an amazing musician, can play a little bit of everything. We'll sketch it out in the room,
Right.
and then we'll just figure out, like what's our way in. And between the 3 of us, we can get it going.
Right.
And then once we get it kind of actualized, sometimes we love what we've done and we don't replace it.
Right.
But most of the time, we'll kind of build a demo. We'll get Margot to come in and sing it. And then we'll probably peel everything back and redo it. So
Keeping anything or?
sometimes,
keep a vocal, keep a
we'll
vocal?
keep the vocal. We
You
almost
do?
always keep the vocal.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And then we build from that.
So you must be metronomed or clicked.
We usually do that.
Okay,
And if
right,
it's
'cause
not a
that's the only
metronome, I'll kind of
Make a loop
We'll
or
build
something.
it that way. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's incredible. You ever then decide to change keys and stuff
Totally.
like that? And then you have to redo the vocal.
So we got to redo the vocal. I've recently purchased a plugin called Xform, which is an Avid, and it really is a good way to stretch. You can probably go, like on instruments, you can go. I've done a whole track where
Key changing?
key change.
Get out of
Yeah,
here.
I've gone like a minor third, major third on a whole track.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you can actually create a modulation in a song by doing
Totally.
that. Does that work? Have you
It's
done
great.
that?
We have done that. It's great.
Wow. That's something that I should not get my hands on ever.
I know.
Because I would
It's
have
dangerous.
every song modulate the whole way.
And someone like David, who's a wonderful, he's really musically very sophisticated, but he can, we'll have a bass part and he'll sing me another bass part and
Right.
we'll just go into Xform and rewrite the bass part without having to replay it.
And how does it sound? It doesn't sound no bits like fractured or anything.
Obviously the further you go,
The more
you
it
start to
sounds.
hear it, but, doing, like whole step, minor third, major third, it's
That's
really great.
Oh my God, keep that fucking thing away from
I
me.
know.
I'll put that thing on Beatle records and just like
Yeah.
modulate rain like the whole way, every section. Oh my God. Right.
So
And she's obviously got other commitments, so
she's mostly, off doing movies. She's an actress,
right,
which is her main gig.
right.
But I met her on Boardwalk Empire, and she just knocked my socks off when I
Right.
started hearing her sing. One of the great voices.
What season?
She started season 2, and then she played a character named Daughter Maitland, who was a very special gal who was a nightclub singer.
Right.
So I got to hear her do this old jazz
Right.
stuff, which she had no experience in, but absolutely
Knocked it out of
slayed
the park.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
And then we became buddies, and obviously we did For Boardwalk Empire, we probably recorded a couple of dozen tracks with just her alone. So I got to know her doing that, and then when that ended,
So did you turn Rick on to her?
Yeah.
That's great, Stewie.
Go
get him.
You know, are you familiar with Largo, the record? Yeah. So they performed it recently at Joe's Pub.
Yeah, I remember
the original band with Rob and Bill and
Eric.
And she came in and they used Margot as a vocalist on
That's
it,
great.
and that's when they all kind of went, wow, yeah. So that's what I'm doing today.
Great.
There'll be some chicken salad involved.
They will?
Yeah.
Are they big on the chicken salad?
Big on
Chicken salad
chicken
sand?
Yeah.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love can drive a man insane. You broke my will, but what a thrill. Goodness gracious, rainbow fire.
We're super excited about our next guest, Steve Rosenthal, who has lived at the nexus of New York City recording scene for the past 4 decades. Steve is a multiple Grammy-winning producer, engineer, and archivist. He was the owner of the famed Magic Shop studio and the legendary Living Room. Simply put, Steve has and continues to do it all.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Rosenthal.
Fine, so kind. I wanna tell this world that you're mine, Lord, that you're my neighbor,
We got plenty of questions for you.
All right, fire away.
Well, my thing with you, and I've known you since 91 now, right? I mean, it's been 25 years, right?
Yeah, that's great.
So...
Hang on, I
But
gotta change hats.
Okay, but I find it fascinating that I knew you in '91 as a producer engineer, right? You work with Lou Reed, Monster Magnet, just so many people that and made great records. You also own the Magic Shop, so you're a studio owner.
I did.
But at that point when I met you, but then as I got
We have
to
sound
know you,
effects we're gonna do, by the way.
as I got to know you, you also owned the Living Room.
Yes.
You ran a club, a rock club, and then now you also do restoration of old. I mean, you really are a master of all these like different parts of what makes of music business, quote unquote.
I'm part of the New
appreciate
York
that.
music community.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I
pillar.
appreciate that. I think some of it came about from necessity because of what was happening to the music business and how it was sort of changing and shrinking. So some of the things that I got into were to sort of keep the studio going and looking at new ways to get more people into the studio.
So your start was at Atlantic Records.
Well, my start was with Herb Abramson. At that point, he had... was not a part of Atlantic anymore, and he owned a studio on Broadway between Broadway and Amsterdam called A1 Sound Studios. It was in the
Upper
new
West Side.
Yeah, on the Upper West Side.
Wow.
It was in the new Milburn Hotel.
Oh yeah.
And when I decided that I wanted to be in the studio, like be a studio dude, I had a really hard time getting a job, and I don't know if it was like that for you guys. Well, like, what year did you start?
I started in '79.
And what year did you start?
About then.
Right. So I'm obviously older than you do. So I started in '73.
That's amazing.
So I really didn't know really how to get into the studio.
But you started as a musician.
Right. I wanted to be a rock star.
Right.
Right. I'm a really bad singer, but, as most singers, you don't really know that, right? It was like, nobody fucking told me, right? So I was like, I'm going to be a rock star. So, yeah, I tried to be a rock star. So what happened in the early days was the way I first started thinking about the studio as a place to be in was my friends from the Bronx I don't know if you know this story.
No,
my
this
friends
is
from
back.
the Bronx got a development deal. Do you guys remember those?
Sure.
Yes, of course.
Sure.
Right?
I ruined a couple of those.
Are you from the Bronx?
Yeah, I'm from the Bronx.
You are?
He's from the Bronx too.
Where?
I went to Clinton.
Really?
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
Columbus.
Oh, there you go. I'm from Marshalloo Parkway.
Yeah, Pelham Parkway.
There you go.
Look at this, the Parkway
This is
twins
pretty-
right here.
This is
Robert
the Bronx
Klein
thing.
went to Clinton.
Yep. I'm a Clinton dude. So,
They used to scare the shit out of us. By
Oh,
the way.
I bet.
The Clinton guys were the tough.
well, it was a crazy school, wasn't it? It was 6,000 boys. When I went, it was
Oh, it was all
6,000
boys?
It was all boys.
Oh.
It was
tough,
a nut house.
Tough.
It was a tough place, yeah.
We were, and Christopher Columbus was pretty tough too. But
That was your school.
Yeah, we were afraid of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing.
I mean, it was a pretty nutty place. I mean, I love Clinton. It was great. It's crazy, but it was
it's funny. Brooklyn was like that too, just because we had like rivalry high schools. I don't think that is the case anymore, right? Your kids don't come home and say, "Oh, those fuckers from FDR," right? That doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, no,
it's like such a different time.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, the Clinton kids used to torture the Bronx Science people.
Oh, they were right next door.
Because they were right down.
Yeah.
And so the poor Bronx Science kids who were
All the
obviously
nerds.
brilliant and running the world right now.
Right. The revenge of the nerds, for sure.
Right, got the revenge. The poor Clinton kids would, just absolutely torture them.
So you were rocking in the Bronx.
So what happened was I went to New Paltz. That's the school I went to, which was really fun in 1972.
Yeah, I bet it
was.
So
Man.
imagine. So I was in school, and then after like the third year, I realized I was studying philosophy, and I realized I'm not going to have a life doing that. So I got to figure out what I want to do. So I thought I'd be a musician and be a rock star and be around music. Because if you think about like how vibrant music was then, I mean, the way everybody loves tech now, that's the way everyone was in love with music.
That was what vinyl was intended to.
Right. And it was really like that. Right. It was enormously magnetic, and it really was life-changing. And, musicians wrote about shit that was important. Yeah, they wrote about fucking and taking drugs, but they also wrote about stuff that was really important. So, anyway, my friends got a development deal, right, with Columbia Records to make a record. And for some reason, which I don't know the answer to, and they got the deal to do the recording at the studio in Colorado owned by the guys from Firefall. Do you remember that song?
Yes.
You are the woman that I...
Well,
Right, that song. The yacht, the yacht rock song, right?
That's amazing.
So they, with their money, they built this studio in Boulder. And I don't know how my two friends got this thing, but they got this development deal, and they were going to go to Boulder to make their demo for Columbia. And so they said, "Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to come.
Wow.
I'll come." So I got in the back. I brought my guitar as if, they would never let me fucking play in a million lifetimes. I knew they weren't, but I brought it anyway. Here's what happened. One of the guys in the partnership was so freaked out about making the record that he literally spent all the time while we were supposed to be making the record either in the bathroom or outside. Just could not deal with the process of making the record. So with my other friend, Gary, I was sort of just thrown in to the control room with him, trying to think about what to do. And obviously I was a big music freak. I didn't know jack about how to make a record, but I certainly knew which records I liked and which records I could try to ape.
Right.
Because I don't know about you guys, but that's what I did in the beginning was I put something in that I really loved, and I was like, well, how the fuck did they do that?
Right.
So it was a really strange situation. I really enjoyed being in the control room. I liked what was going on there. I liked the energy in the control room. I liked the fact that people, my friends were really trying to do something really good. Most of the times they were just fucking off. Mm-hmm. But here they were, right? Yeah. But here they were actually trying to create something, and they were like into it. So after that experience, I decided I would go to engineering school. So in 1973,
there were not that many.
There was only one.
See, that's
it was
incredible.
Called the Recording Institute of America.
Well, there you go. that would be the one, right?
Did you get a lab coat?
Yeah, I wish. And okay, so I went to the Recording Institute of America, which was a 4-week course. My parents, by the way, wouldn't pay for the course.
Wow.
Because I had quit college, so they were pissed off at me. Right. But my friend Richie Berger, he lent me the $700.
Richie Berger.
Yeah, he's awesome.
A mensch.
He lent me the $700 for the course, and I went to it. And what it was we went to what became Soundworks in the Studio 54 building, in the basement of the Studio 54 building. Did either of you ever go?
No.
The studio that was owned by the Benantes?
Studio...
Soundworks. It was in the basement.
I never went there, but when I worked at Eventide when I was a kid, when I was 17 or 18, it was right across the street from Studio 54.
Right, and this studio was in the
West
basement.
54th Street.
Yeah.
So it was right. I never knew about the studio.
And it was also called ODO Studios for a while. And that's where I learned, I had my 4-week course. And basically you went in for half an hour and they said, here's a microphone. This is a Fender amplifier.
That's so funny.
It's just crazy.
Was there a console?
Yeah, I'm sure it was gigantic, and I wish I knew what the fuck it was, because I bet you it was really cool.
Right.
But it's all a little
So
fake.
4 weeks.
So I have 4 weeks, and then I got my diploma for the recording.
That's my
institute.
kind of school. 4 weeks.
Four
And there was a
weeks.
2-week vacation. It was during Christmas.
That's awesome. Yeah, exactly.
Oh
So
my God.
you came out of that and you were ready to roll.
Right. So then I tried to get a job, and of course I had no experience.
Right.
So when I went to all the great studios that were around at that time, they were like, "Well, you can start as an internship, maybe, but you can't learn in the studio, and you're just going to do deliveries and clean the toilets and all
That's
that
what I did
stuff."
for 2 years.
Right.
I literally
So I
logged
was
tapes.
like, okay, I'll do that. And they were like, okay, we'll put you on the list or whatever. So I think I waited about 5 months, and I kept going around.
And nothing.
I don't think there were resumes at that point. Did we fucking have resumes, or is that like an 80s
not in a
thing?
recording studio. No fucking way, dude.
Can you roll a
I think
joint?
I had
Yeah.
a resume. I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah, no.
And I went to like Blank Tapes, and I went
You go to media, and you
I
go
went
to-
to media, and I went to A&R.
Right, that was pre-Electric Lady, so
Yeah.
you wouldn't have gone there. Did you go to the record plant?
I'm sure I did. I'm sure because it was the place.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get a job, and this is a true story. So I went downtown with my friend. You remember how I used to go to Canal Street because it was like electronics?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? You'd go down there and you could buy all this great shit. So I went down from the Bronx with my friends. After I got back from school, after living in that loft, I went back and I lived in my parents' house for a little while. So I was back living in my parents' house, which was really crazy. My parents are wonderful. My mom was wonderful. My dad still is here. He is wonderful. But I really didn't know what the hell I was going to do, and they were getting sort of worried,
Right.
as I'm
As
sure
they
I'll
do.
do the same thing with my kids. So I went down to Canal Street, I remember, to get some stuff, and I went with my friends that didn't have any money. And we went, and they bought some stuff, and then they thought it was funny to just leave me there. And I didn't have any money to get back on the subway. And they were like, oh, fuck them, we'll just leave them there.
Practical.
Right.
Make
So,
for a good story.
Good old school fun.
right. So they're like, I'll just fucking leave them here. And the crazy thing is, I was left on the corner of Broadway
And
and Canal,
Right.
which ended
I used
up
to work
being,
there.
which is where I ended up spending so much of my
Yeah,
life,
yeah,
literally.
yeah.
Dave's Luncheonette.
Right. So I got really angry and I got really pissed off, and I was like, fuck you, this is crazy, I got to find a job. So I panhandled money, whatever it was, to get on the subway. I don't know. What did it cost in 1973?
20 cents.
Yeah, like 50 cents or yeah.
Yeah, so I got my money, I got on the subway, I went home. I didn't know what else to do. I took out the Yellow Pages. Literally. I took out the Yellow Pages. The first studio was A1 Sound Studio.
Right.
I called up. I said, hi, I'm looking for an engineering job. And Herb said, okay, come down tomorrow. Literally.
That's it.
And I said, what? And he said, yeah, come down tomorrow. So I came down the next day. I met Herb. He sort of looked like Captain Ahab. He was an incredibly imposing guy,
Yeah.
right? With this unbelievable beard. Scared the ever-loving shit out of me. He said, do you know anything? And I was like, well, not really, but of course I did go to the recording institute.
You saluted too.
You had your diploma? Right?
On my
Your little-
diploma,
your little badge.
my badge. Right. Oh gosh. So he said, "Okay, listen, you can come here. I need a new." I think he called them assistants, but basically it was just him, his wife, and this other person who would do engineering. So I said, "Okay," and I started driving a cab so that I could get enough money to move close by him. I moved to 77th between West End and Riverside, and this is not bullshit. I lived across the street from Miles Davis. And it's not bullshit, my hand to God. I saw him come out of the house on Sunday in his bathrobe many, many Sundays. That's in the Don Cheadle movie, right?
Right.
It's not bullshit. I saw him come out. He would talk to people. I talked to him a number of times. The shades were drawn. Like my window could look in his house. The shades were drawn. He would not come out except Sunday. I don't remember what time it was, but he would come out. He would open the door, and there would always be people there,
Right.
who would want to talk to him. So anyway, I lived on that block, and then I started working for Herbie, and I didn't get paid for the first year, literally. I
So you
just cleaned his toilets.
And you just drove a cab for money.
And I drove a cab for money. I was a really bad cab driver. Oh, fucking hell, I was really bad.
Did you learn from working there?
Yeah, I mean, Herb was, he had the Atlantic way of doing things. So that's what he ingrained in me. I could only use 3 mics on the drums. So I used a 47 for the kick drum. I used a salt shaker. What's that
the
thing
salt
called?
shaker, that's
A
what they
salt
called them.
shaker for the snare drum mic.
Right.
And then I think it was either a 44 or a 70. What's the big square one?
That's
the
a
RCA
44.
mic.
Yeah, 44.
That's what would go over the drum kit, right? And that was the Atlantic way. And so
So, salt shaker on the snare.
47 or tube 47?
Probably
I was
two.
a Tube 47.
Yeah.
I don't even.
I don't think there was FET.
1974 or 5. So
Amazing.
and this RCA mic as the overhead. And he had the Black Atlantic Records console, which was a tube console, where the faders, by the way, went backwards. Sort of just like the Magic Shop console when I got it. When you brought the faders down, it got louder. And what Herb explained to me is you were bringing the sound into the room.
Wow.
I'm like, this is backwards, isn't he? And he said, no, you're bringing the sound in. It said, okay, I'm bringing the sound.
Bringing the sound into the room, sir.
Isn't Atlantic sort of responsible for turning the rotary into a fader, period, which was probably the first design of how that happened?
Yeah, they also had rotary pots
Right.
for the reverb sends.
Right.
He had a wall of Pultecs, right? And the goofiest Scully 12-track tape machine.
Wow.
And that's where I learned a punch, because the freaking remote had wood buttons. I mean, it was built by some freak. It literally had wood buttons.
That's amazing.
And so you had to flip the toggle switches to go from repro to cell sync
Right.
and punch in at the same time. And so that's how I learned to punch.
Oh, right, because then if you didn't go to cell sync, you would hear a delay.
You'd hear the
Yeah.
delay. So literally, that's what he had. This was like completely
Incredible.
goofy. He had an 8-track Scully and a 4-track, which I don't know who sunk up for him, but it was just nutty.
Right.
And so that's how I learned to punch, by flipping the switches and hitting the two buttons.
And what
at the
was
same
his
time.
musical taste?
It was amazing. It was all R&B,
Right, fabulous.
full band R&B. So
Fabulous.
it was so many Atlantic artists who were past, the point where they were selling gobs of records, but they were still trying to make records. And so that's a really wonderful question. And so they would come to see Herb, right? And they would work on the song selection in a very traditional sort of way, an old school way. And they would figure out what they would want to do, and then it would be all live. So it would be drums, bass, guitar, organ, piano, background singers, horns,
All
and
live.
the lead vocalist all live at the same time. And I would watch him in the beginning, completely marveling at like how he didn't freak out, and he would be completely calm about it and be able to deal with all of the things. Yeah, I mean, he was, like we all are in the music business, semi-psychotic, but
Right.
in this particular moments, he was just
Healthy.
absolutely relaxed.
And was he a song guy, or?
Yeah, completely. I mean, they would talk about what songs to do. He would try to suggest songs for them to do. In that sense, it was very old school.
Right.
So when it was a Herb record, that's what it was like. And then there were other people who would, hire the studio to just come and record. And then
Right.
I would assist or sometimes engineer. And, I have a very clear memory. So one day, maybe about 18 months into it, Lee Fields was coming, who is still an
Yeah,
artist
still
that
around.
people come and hear. And he was coming to make a record with Herbie and at A1 and with his band. And I was setting up, And usually I would set up and then Herb would show up. And I clearly, this one day, Herb was not coming. And I like called the house and I was completely freaked out.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm not coming. And I was like, what do you mean you're not coming? He said, you can do this, do it.
Right.
And I was like, I can't do this. He was like, exactly. And I was like, no, I can't do it. And he was like, no, you can do it. You're ready to do it. Just go do it. So I got thrown in, to the deep end. And I mean, looking back on it, I did an okay job. I didn't think the vocal was recorded all that well. I think, he's such a dynamic singer that I probably could have done a better job
Right.
on, on his vocal. He didn't complain about it, but just
Right.
like when I heard it, I thought, it's blowing up a little bit.
Right.
But I was able to deal with it, and it was a full live session, just the way.
So
I
everybody
described
in the
you.
same room playing.
Everybody in the
Horns
same room playing, and I had no assistant.
And how do you get separation on the vocal at all?
Well, he had this really good, like I did. He had this little goofy ISO system,
Oh, he did? Okay.
right? Like, which I aped, of course. And, it was like a three, it had three sides of a like gobo of 6 foot, and then we would just put the singer inside
Right.
the little gobo thing.
And so when you say
No drum booth, no ISO
right,
booth.
right.
when you say you blew it up a little bit, those were kind of those records when things got blown up. They had a harmonic distortion that was pleasing.
Yeah.
So it probably, looking back on it, it might not be as bad as you thought.
You're probably right. It's sweet of you to say that. I mean, I don't know. I just felt when he came in the control room, I was like, they were all really happy. And maybe that was part of the Atlantic thing. It's certainly
Right.
part of like when you listen to Howlin' Wolf or Muddy
Right.
Waters records, they blow up in this delightful
Yeah.
way.
I think
So-
I've heard him on Aretha records. You know what I mean? Like I've heard like that capsule distortion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to do it now. Like, I listen to Leon Bridges a little bit, and they're, he's like the
Right.
new soul
Yeah.
sort of guy, and
Right.
they're trying to do it with him. I'm not sure they're doing it right yet.
Right.
It
Yeah.
sounds a little digital to me,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is not the kind
Well,
of.
that's my point.
it's not.
If
the
you're
kind of
blowing
thing.
up either the microphone or a tube pre or a tube limiter,
Right.
those kind of sounds are kind of
But also, I feel like with the like new tube mics, you know what I mean? They don't blow up
In the
like
same
old
way,
tube
right.
mics do. I think they're just too refined now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas, maybe with the 48 or a Telefunken, you really could get that, which is really
in a good way.
in a good way. Yeah,
well,
of
that's
course.
something you taught me, which you probably don't even know. I mean, I
have no idea.
learned so much from watching you work.
Really?
I never
what not
knew.
to do.
just distort everything.
No, I learned about how to blow stuff up from John in a great way that I had no idea about.
Wow,
And I
cool.
remember watching you do it, and I'd be like, what the fuck is he doing to the mic pre? And like you'd be turning the mic pre up, and then you're sitting on it with one of your Compacts or whatever you were in love
Yeah.
with at the time, sitting on it, and the vocal would be just so extraordinary sounding. I'd be like, wow, that's really, really
Oh, that's cool. Thanks, Steve.
No, I mean, that's something
Stevie.
Johnny,
Yay.
I completely learned
Kudos
that
to Johnny.
You learned my
watching
one trick. That was that's my one trick pony.
Stop. That's,
So-
That's the trick, everybody.
that's not true.
so how long did you last at A1?
Well, you want to know the real story of why
Come
I don't
on.
work there anymore? Am I allowed to tell the story? So Herb had a daughter,
Okay.
right? So,
Okay.
so
This is going somewhere.
right. So I'm going to tell the story. So, I swear to you, I did not want to go out with his daughter. She was beautiful, but I did not want to go out with his daughter because you don't go out with.
Right.
You just don't.
Right.
And so for 3 years, I kept saying no, thank you, no, and I just kept saying no. And so after 3 years, they finally said, "You really need to take her out." So I said, "Okay." After 3 years, I said, "Okay." We went on this completely innocent date, went to see a movie, whatever. Brought her back to the house. They fired me the next morning.
Are you kidding me? What?
Okay, kids, if you're listening to this right now, lesson number 1 from Steve Rosenthal.
exactly.
Do not date the studio
Right.
owner's daughter.
I have a different lesson, which I will say really quick, is working with artists. artists should never date the producer's daughter. Because I had one where a guy said to me, I really like your daughter, Sarah. I would like to date her. And I said, yo, dude, producer Johnny is a lot more fun than Father Johnny. I said, producer Johnny, you go out, you get drinks, we party, you go on the road. If you're banging chicks, it's cool. Father Johnny, way different, man. Super uptight. Stay away from my daughter. And he was like, okay.
Sicilian father.
With you on that. Listen, it was completely innocent.
That's amazing.
I don't, you know, it was okay because it was time probably.
To move. Yeah.
I had just worked with Otis Blackwell on a record called These Are My Songs. And you know, Herb actually got all the credit for the record, but I actually did the record, and that started happening more and more. Where I actually finally knew what the hell I was doing, and I was doing these records. And so this Otis Blackwell record was a record you can still get.
Wow.
I mean, it was, you know, him doing Great Balls of Fire, Return to Sender, Don't Be Cruel, Fever,
all of his hits,
and him sitting there talking about how he, you know, sold the song to Elvis and the Colonel for $25. I mean, just what an absolute education. That was an amazing thing about working with all the great black and R&B artists that Herbie brought, is that they would really educate me about what the music business was like and how they got damaged. Guy? Well, no, because he was with Atlantic, and then he was bought out in 1960. So he was before Atlantic really blew up and became.
No, I meant Otis Blackwell.
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. I know Dennis Dykin knows a lot about. About Otis and you know, it was obviously an honor to meet him and be able to record him
those
and hear
classic
him.
Songs.
Yeah, hear him do those songs, and of course they were just like the versions that came out.
Right.
You know, it's funny because over the years, I got to finally work on Elvis, right? John saw me at the last years at the Magic Shop. I did a number of Elvis Presley projects where I mixed from original multis on Elvis. So it's funny to finally hear Don't Be Cruel and Return to Sender.
Okay, we got to get to that. Well, I want to get to those multis.
You know, I mean, I loved working for Herbie. I learned so much.
Yeah.
And he really... was quite a character. Smoked the strongest pot of anyone I've ever seen. Really? And we've had a lot of people come through.
Now I like him even more.
Go.
We've had a lot of people come through the Magic Shop over the years who have like,
oh my God,
yikes. And but Herb would smoke a little bit, and then he would tell these stories, and it was just insane. So, yeah, I mean, it was quite an adventure to learn from him.
That's sort of the beginning of rock and roll. I mean, Atlantic, it really is close to the beginning of this whole thing that we've been spending our lives doing.
Yeah.
And that's amazing that you have a first-hand connection to that.
You know, it's funny, in Herb's, you know, it's like he was an outcast. He was not he was not really a liked person, and I'm sorry to say things like that, but he's somebody that somebody should do a book about. No. Because there are lots of great engineers besides, you know, Tom Dowd that went through the Herbie system, that came out the other side and made records and made, you know, iconic records. Right. And he's somebody that's pretty much forgotten.
Right. Yeah. And he was before his time, you know what I mean?
Right, before his time. And he was a son of a bitch. You know, he was hard to deal with. And, you know how people in the music business are. If you're, you know, you can be cranky to a fault, but if you're super cranky, then they stop wanting to deal with you.
Right.
So I think that's part of the thing. But if anybody needs like a real book or some sort of examination about it, it's him.
Fabulous.
So what year is the separation?
So that's probably 77 now.
Okay, so now you're just...
Right, so I'm fired. I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I started working as a market research coder.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, so wait, marketing.
Yeah, so I went to work at a market research firm.
All along still playing and writing?
Yeah, still playing. I had a band. I played CBGBs a bunch of times.
Right.
So I told you how I played CBs, right? Did I ever tell you that?
I don't think so.
So, okay, so I went to play for Hilly, which is what you did, right? So I went to play for Hilly in 1975 or whatever the fuck it was. And he was like, all right, well, you don't suck, but where's your band? And I was like, well, I don't have a band. I don't have a band. And he said, well, you can't really play here without a band. And I was like, oh, fuck, you know, but I really want to play. And he said, oh, I got an idea. I think I know what I can do with you. And I said, okay, what's that? He said, go on and play while the bands are setting up. So that's what I did. So I had a number of gigs where I played CBs by myself with my crappy little Fender amp and my Fender Duosonic guitar. And the bands would be behind me setting up. And I would, you know, babble on and sing badly or whatever the fuck I wanted to do. And then when the band was ready, I would get off stage.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, so I got to play CBs a bunch of times. So, yeah, I didn't have a gig. I think what happened was after I left Herbie, I tried to get a gig probably in legitimate places, right? But I was fucked up already because I had already engineered records. Right. Not records of really famous people, but I had already been an engineer. So when I went to a great studio and I said I'd like to work here, by that point I think I might have even had a resume with credits. They were like, "Well, you can't clean my toilets."
Right.
You can't do
overqualified.
that. You can't be a runner. Right. You actually have to work, but we don't know any of the people really that you've made records with, so we can't trust you.
Right.
To work.
Right. They weren't going to hire you as a staff engineer.
Right. So I decided once to go to A&R, right? So I went to A&R because that was like one of the incredible places after Herbie. I went. So I met the studio manager and he said, well, you know, clearly you know a little bit, but you don't know enough to go in the room with Paul Simon or James Taylor or Phil, because it was Phil Ramone's place.
Yeah.
But if you want, you can solder cables. So I was like, all right, well, either market research coding or soldering cables.
Working in a recording studio.
Right. So I was like, okay, I'll solder cables. So he said, okay, fine, come on Monday. So I came. They took me down to like the sub basement. I mean, I'm in the basement now in Brooklyn, but this was like the sub.
This
fucking,
is like magma.
Yeah,
like all this fucking magma laying around here.
Right. This was like, what's that great cat, the Marvel guy, the Mole Man?
Yeah.
Remember that guy in the early Marvel
He had to wear
days?
glasses
With the
'cause he
glasses,
couldn't see?
That's where we were. That's how fucking far down we were. I was with the Mole Man down in the basement. So they put me in this room, which is no bigger than like, I don't know, someone's little bathroom, literally. And every day they bring me down the cables. And I can't believe I'm telling you guys these stories.
This is
with
great.
the mics on. Jesus. So every day they bring me down a batch of cables. Right? And I got my soldering gun, and, you know, and my soldering thing. They bring me down these cables, and the guy says, you better do a good job on these cables, because if Phil doesn't like them, you're going to be in trouble. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I'm going to do a good job. You know me, John. I'm I like to work. So, okay, so I'm down in the basement. Days go on. The weeks go on. I reach like maybe like 3.5. I keep asking, will you let me go upstairs and literally see the place?
Right.
No. Can I go get coffee for Phil? No. No, definitely not. So I was like, okay. So I made it about 3.5 weeks, literally. And so finally, every day the same fucker comes down and he asks me the same question, right? So finally, he comes in, he opens the door and he goes, you know, you better do a good job on these, because if you don't, Phil is going to be really angry. And I said, you know what? If Phil doesn't like these fucking cables, he should just come down here and talk to me about it. And the guy was like completely horrified. Right?
He scared the shit out of him.
And he was completely horrified. And literally no more than 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes later, I got a call from the studio manager, you need to come up. You need to come and see me now. And I came in his office and he fired me. And he said, you can't work here. And he said, you don't fit in here. And I was like, how the fuck do you know what I'm like?
I'm down in the basement.
You know, I've been with the Mole Men down, you know, the subterranean world for the last month. How would you have any idea what I could do? You know, clearly this is not where I belong, because you won't even give me an opportunity
to get in the studio.
You know, and it's funny because people always say, like, at the Magic Shop, historically, I've always given interns the opportunity to watch what goes on, as long as it's okay with you guys. As long as it's all right with you for them to be in the room, I'm happy to have them be in the room.
Right.
And a lot of it is because of the way I got treated
Right.
when I was in a similar position. And I really thought, well, if I ever get to be the dude, I'm going to try to treat people who are starting out in a better way. So I always love to promote, magic shop interns to become engineers and full engineers and then producers
you
and
turned
whatever.
down a bunch of them, by the way.
Right, and I've turned out a lot of them, and they own studios, and they make records and all that stuff. But I think a lot of it has to do with the way that I was treated when I was younger, and sort of mistreated. So anyway, so that was my experience at like a big studio.
Right.
I couldn't get a job where you were working because I had this ridiculous resume, which they wouldn't let me in the room. So I went to work as a market research coder. And then I decided to open a studio with my friend from the Bronx, the same guy Gary Dorfman, who was one of the two artists who had that development deal.
Right.
Oh, cool.
He was still working on his music, and I really loved to be in the studio. So he borrowed money, I borrowed some money, and we bought the shell of a studio on 17th Street, 13 East 17th Street, this place that was called Dreamland.
Wow, that's funny.
And it was originally a 24-track studio. It was like totally a 70s joint. It was carpeting everywhere. Wood and carpeting. The drum booths were carpeted. You guys remember. It was like so dead in there. I mean, it was just fucking so dead. Yeah. And we couldn't
You like the smell of orange amps? I like the smell of dirty carpeting.
There you go.
Ashtrays and...
So we put all our money together, and we couldn't afford the gear. We couldn't afford to buy the 24-track gear. So we put 8-track stuff in there. So I bought a half-inch 80-8.
Wow.
And I had like a Tascam console. And we had this little live room. And it was in the back of a loft. And I lived with my first wife for many years in the front part of it.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
And it was just a really delightful way to live. I mean, people who have like loft studios or studios in their apartments and stuff like that, it's just so great. I mean, I woke up, I was in my bathrobe, I had my coffee, I literally opened the door, went down the hall, and then, had fun making a record and stuff. So...
What circa early 80s?
This is 78.
78.
Wow.
79, 80. This was like new wave punk rock stuff.
Yeah.
So it was
Thompson
really
Twins
fun.
and
Right. It was
actually,
really
it's
fun.
probably
Punk
pre
rock
that, more
stuff.
punk rock.
Yeah, it was like punk rock. Like I had who's the guy that Gigi Allen. Right. I mean, I had some serious hardcore punk rock people come to Dreamland. We only had one good microphone. The microphone I'm looking at right now, 414,
That's amazing.
was the only good microphone we had. I remember I would freak out if anyone got too close to it. I literally went to Gigi Allen. He was fucking putting his hands on the microphone. I was like, you need to get your hands off my microphone. And I literally went in front of him like this and said, don't get any closer to the microphone than this. And he was cool. Yeah. I mean, you guys probably know it. Sometimes the really psychotic ones, if you deal with them like straight on and honestly, they're like, cool, okay, I get it. You're going to set the boundaries. It's cool, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, I did. I mean, we had a blast. I had a band. My first wife and I had a band. It was like a 3-piece band, like synth pop band, TV Babies. We put out 4 records. Our last record was number 30 on the CMJ chart.
Wow.
It was like, if you want to hear synth pop records, that's sort of what it was like. We started a label called Rockin' Horse. And we put out about 8 or 9 New York bands.
Oh, cool.
It was all incredibly DIY.
Right.
That was a really fun time period because you could put out records.
Pre-indie.
Yeah, this was 78, 77, 79. And you could put out records and send them to college radio and they would play them. And there were all these great fanzines. Remember that? Like all the like the DIY newspapers. You could take out a freaking half-page ad. There was a New York Rocker. There was all this stuff that was sort of percolating, which was outside of the mainstream of the big rock business, was really starting to happen. And it was just a really fun time period to make records in. I had really shitty equipment, so I really learned to listen.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? If you have like I mean, those Tascam consoles, they blew up pretty quickly.
Right.
So I learned to listen.
Yeah.
And learn when it was going to blow up. My only reverb was an Orband. What's that goofy thing with the blue one?
Yeah. That's great.
What the fuck is that thing called? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I like the concept of, like, for me, even talking about working on like old consoles and stuff like that, and people say, well, the buttons are scratchy and stuff like that. But I like the fact that you have to kind of pay attention. You know what I mean? I like the fact that when you're listening to your mix, you really have to listen, because I feel like it really trains you to listen.
Well, you're sweet. I mean, you're just really great at what you do. And also, I mean, you sat in front of my console for years and years, and some days it would be happy, and some days it would be not happy, and you were able to deal with it when it was on a cranky day and it was buzzing and making fucking noises and whatever.
Hey, folks, so we're going to take a break from Steve's interview and pick it up on our next episode. It was great hearing how Steve got his start, and we look forward to exploring the many tales of the famed Magic Shop studio. So tune in next time.
Everybody get up and boogie. This is the last dance.
Every so often, Johnny and I like to get together and talk about our favorite pastime. That's listening to records. Here's the record of the week.
A blind class aristocracy, back to the opera class, you see, appeared in the pendulum yard.
Okay, so we're talking about Surf's Up, the great Brian Wilson. Pretty amazing story of how this record was made, and every time listening to it is a learning experience.
Let's go back to last week when you kind of said, hey, we should talk about this song. And I was not hip to it at all. I mean, I knew Beach Boys stuff and I knew Heroes and Villains. Mm-hmm. That's from Surf's Up too, right?
No, Heroes and Villains is from
Smile. Okay. So Surf's Up is this mystery song that I never really listened to as a kid or even... And then Stewie was like, hey, we should talk about this song. The story behind it is fascinating.
Well, at least my knowledge of it was from... the infamous Smile demo tape that went around, which is what everyone had. And it was really incomplete and little shards of songs. And I was a big fan of the album Surf's Up.
Right.
Without ever knowing the backstory.
But so when that record came out, like in 71, did you buy? Like,
yeah, I had it then.
Amazing.
And
so cool.
I was a fan of the record, and it was sort of a weird period for the Beach Boys because Brian was supposedly gone.
Right. Now, gone physically, mentally, or both?
Both. And gone from the band. He was gone from the touring band.
Right.
But they came out with this record that was largely Carl's sort of first masterpiece.
Right.
Long Promise Road. Really great things that he sang, but they had to get Brian on the record somehow.
Right.
In order to call it a Beach Boys record, they had to figure something out.
Right.
And, I was lucky enough a few years ago to make the acquaintance of Al Jardine.
Nice.
And hang with him a bit and go to dinner with him and go to his place at Big Sur. And he took me to his studio, which had all this great Beach Boys memorabilia and all the gear that they used, Brian's piano.
Wow.
And he was remarkably open about talking about all of it.
Incredible.
Talking about this period in reference to their manager and main co-writer of the record, this Jack Riley, who appeared for only this little period.
Right.
And
so wait, I read on Wiki that he had met Brian, but then he went out to manage, but he also co-wrote.
He co-wrote.
Wow, that's fucking
I think he co-wrote Day in the Life of a Tree. He was a lyricist, and he might have written Long Promise Road.
Really?
So he was a manager, but he got in, and he was pretty good wordsmith.
Right.
But it didn't last long.
Right.
And I can't imagine the dysfunction that was going on.
Right.
And this is pre-Eugene Landy and Brian.
Who is Eugene Landy?
Eugene Landy was the psychotherapist that kind of took Brian under his wing and Svengali'd him back to health and was then considered to have been suspect in his control over Brian.
Oh, wow.
Carl and Al could cover some of the vocal things that made the listener still think that you were hearing Brian.
Right. Because for me, when I heard that first bit the first time, when you played me the demo and then we listened to the album bit, I never even thought about it. And just 10 minutes ago when we listened again, and I was reading Wiki, and it said resung by Carl.
Resung doubled over the main vocal.
Yeah. And then you could hear it, like, as you listen, then you realize, and then when Brian comes in the second half, you could tell the vocal tonality totally changes.
That's right. You can hear their sibling relationship, and what's really cool about it is Carl's singing, but he doesn't sound like he's trying to sound like Brian. He just sounds like him, and that's his voice. Yeah. And but the really great part about sort of restudying, like we just did, is the 3 movements of the song.
Right.
Right. So, as both of us as producers and arrangers listening to that, it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
So it's 3 different pieces of music cut together. First one being Brian's original demo from '66 that Carl sang over the top of, and orchestrated all this great stuff. There's brass, there's xylophone, there's this great pluck guitar, bass, like sort of shells, percussion kind of thing. And it didn't occur to me that until we just listened right now, that the next movement is just a cut-in version of Brian by himself on piano, double vocal.
Just him.
Right. No overdubs. Someone made that decision to leave the whole middle of the song completely alone as just Brian.
Right.
So you go from big production to piano vocal. Like, who the fuck does that? I mean, how brilliant. And then the end, which is, I guess it was said that Brian came in and said, I got an idea for the end of the song.
Yeah.
Take Child as Father of the Man.
I think he felt like the end of the song needed to build more or something. I think that's what it said on the Wiki thing. So then he basically took the concept from the older record that there is that song. It's called
Child's Father of the Man.
Right. And then they brought that back as the coda. Of this.
I did actually go to see, when Al and Brian were in town last year, I went to see them at the Beacon.
Oh, you did? Cool.
And they played unannounced, including to the band, because Al told me after he had no idea this was coming. Brian just said, hey, let's do Pet Sounds in sequence.
Really?
On stage, they had no idea, but obviously they knew the songs.
Yeah, of course.
And the opening act was Jeff Beck, who then, after they finished Pet Sounds, he came out and joined them for like a whole set of like surf rock, which was kind of mind-blowing.
Right.
In listening just now with you, it's great to listen with you because I think we both responded to like what an odd record it is, and also the process for how it got done, and all these little sections, when they go from section to section, there's a lot of retards and tempo changes.
Yeah.
And
so that first bit is clearly not like any kind of click. It's just him playing at home, right? I mean, because he's moving around.
That's right.
And then they have to lay shit on top.
But we both responded to every time the thing fell apart.
Yeah. And those breaks.
And it falls apart, and I guess it's just the most beautiful chaos.
Yeah.
And you could have fixed it, maybe. Could you? Or they
sounds to me like they probably tried it a ton, and they were just like, it's fine.
And it's all beautifully in tune.
Yeah.
But in its own charming way, just like chaotic. And when you listen to stuff like that, it's a lesson for me.
Yeah.
It's a lesson in how difficult it is to the restraint in trying to fix something that might have a charm.
Right. Well, I noticed on all 3 parts of those songs, there's an amazing clarity, and there's air, and like the piano sounds beautiful, and there's something really just beautiful about how big it sounds. And then I realized, because there's no drums on it.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
No cymbals.
Right. Can you imagine it took like 6 years to make? Can you imagine if they had to get a kick drum sound back then? But that's a really good point.
Right. I mean, it doesn't sound small in any way. It sounds huge.
It sounds huge. And
no guitars. It's like really amazing.
Well, it's got that one little pluck guitar, but there's no strumming guitar.
Right.
There's no hat. There's those, whatever those shells are, that's kind of shaking.
Right. And like you said, the xylophone, those little accenty things.
And the crazy horn thing, which if you go back, we have this, Johnny and I are sitting in front of the original, the re-release of the box set of Smile, which has every version and every outtake from those sessions. And we're certainly just like fans of it. Like Mark Lynette would be a good guy to have here to, really get deeper into this stuff. But we're talking more as fans. Yeah.
Actually, fans who make records also.
Right.
We're kind of thinking through how they did it as opposed to knowing how they did it.
Right.
Right? That's
yeah,
accurate,
absolutely.
Right? Okay.
So, I mean, and we can probably go through this whole box and pick little gems from everywhere that are all lessons in production.
Last week we played like every version of it. Like there were like 5 versions on this, and it was just mind-boggling how much
and how it got put together. Right. So like doing the archaeology up to that final version, which I don't know if the listener can go to Spotify and listen or go to the store and buy the album.
Yeah,
maybe
buy the fucking or whatever. Just
support.
Yeah, Spotify. Just listen to it. Listen to music.
Or they can. I'll email it to them for $2.
I'll come over and sing it to them for $5.
Or don't listen to this.
But all right, so here's one thing I think, and we might have to go back and listen again. But we listened just now, and I feel like the first movement, where you said Carl's singing, when it goes to the second movement, I feel like when it goes to Brian, the vocal splits left and right.
I think it does, yeah.
And that's pretty great. I mean, that's just a subtle thing, and that. I mean, that's the stuff we try to do all the time in our records now, just to make it more interesting. Like just to jar the listener or make our records just more interesting and fun.
But to your point about sort of how big the record sounded,
right?
Do you is any of that? Can you attribute any of that to the technology of that era, or do you think that just the arrangement and the way?
Well, I think it's the arrangement, but I mean, I'm sure, it's hard to say without knowing, like if, let's say the first movement, they kept his piano. Where did he do it? Did he do it at United Western or did he do it in his house? I can't even, I'd have to know that stuff, but I'm going to assume that they're really nice tube microphones on the piano, routed through, beautiful old console, a lot of amplifiers and stuff, and it's going right to a tape machine.
Right.
And I mean, at a certain point, he probably has I'm sure he has a beautiful touch of how he plays. I mean, the piano sounds super in tune and great, so I'm sure it's like just a beautifully recorded piano.
Well, the interesting thing was, and here's another sort of production lesson. Say it is how he didn't like that. He thought the song sort of sucked.
Yeah.
And he thought his vocal of the demo. I don't know what was his reference. It just he hated it. It was shit. He hated it.
I think he said something about shit.
Yeah, he didn't really want to do it again. He didn't care about it. And that somehow the people around him were able to see the beauty in it and talk him back into it, which is often,
How many times has that happened to you on a record?
Well, people throw stuff out all the time. They make a left turn and throw something out, and it's a mistake. And I assume that he came around to appreciate its beauty because he then was able to release the final version of Smile with Surf's Up on it.
Yeah, so looking at Wiki, it says his comment of it is Surf's Up, atrocious. I'm embarrassed, totally embarrassed. That was a piece of shit. Vocally, it was a piece of shit. That's pretty. But I assume that's why that first demo of it, Carl re-sang over the top to convince him, hey, I'll sing it and it'll be better. And like you said, the timbre is, I mean, it's obviously a different voice, but it's really not that far off from what Brian would sound like.
I got to tell you, I never knew it wasn't Brian singing at the beginning.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, you've been listening forever. This is a new gem for me. I'm going to go out and I might even have the album on vinyl. I got to check, but if not, I'm just going to go fucking buy it because this is really great. This really blows my mind.
Super. Hey, not for nothing, but aren't we supposed to be talking about gear?
I'm Professor Turgerson. A lot of people think
gear.
It's just information about the past, but not me. I mean, I hold
gear
very, very sacred. Sacred. The way the farmer looks at the earth and he holds it sacred. The way a Christian takes the Bible and he holds it sacred. The way a lot of people hold their marriage sacred. That's how I feel about it.
So here's a question for you. So at Arlen, one side is an 80 series Neve, and another side is vintage API. Started tracking date. I was like, wow, how do I decide what I'm going to use for what?
Right.
Because quite honestly, if either one of them were there, I'd be totally happy.
Right.
But I made my decision, and it was really fun on the fact that there's one bucket of 16 in the API had the 560 graphics. So I said, how fun would it be just to do my drums?
Yeah.
All drums with 560 graphics on everything.
That's so great.
And it was really a fun way to do it.
Yeah.
Really quick and intuitive, and, you know, toms are ringing, boom, boom on the 560.
Yeah.
But I didn't, other than that, I didn't really have a logical reason
To do that?
to do that.
Yeah.
It was really just the EQs that I went, oh, okay.
Yeah. It's funny, I'm such a creature of habit that, remember when we worked on the Willie record together in 1988?
Yeah.
Remember I had my 2 little lunch boxes?
Yeah,
I had
right.
just bought them.
Right.
And it was 4 mic pre's and 4 graphics. And I swear that pretty much 95% of records I've made since then, I've always had the bass drum and the snare drum through the graphics, tracking and mixing.
Right.
Like I love being able to just do all that notching. And I
Just the right frequencies.
I don't do anything insane, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I just do the normal, like, bass drum. Maybe I'll take out a little 500, whatever. But it's normal stuff. But it's so fun to do that on the graphics,
Yeah.
as opposed to not.
Yeah.
I love that. So I can see that being incredible for toms and all that.
It was really fun. And that was, once I realized, you know, that that's what I was going to do, it sort of made sense. But for all the other instruments, I would have been happy with it on either side.
Right. Also, the APIs sound harder than the Neve, so that's probably good for drums
Right.
because they smack more, you know,
Right.
more transient.
Right.
You know, they're more rock sounding.
Right.
So it's probably a good idea anyway. You know, get your drums like really cracking. I've always liked that about the APIs. They're so much fun to use.
I know. And plus, there's something to be said visually, you know, as the drummer's kind of changing his drums and his tuning, to just be able to have a mental note visually of where your equalization is. It's so much easier and
Right.
just intuitive.
Right. And shaping is great. You know, you can really sculpt it.
Right.
You know, it's not just parametric 2dB or, you know, it's like really, it is a shape of a sound. Yeah, no, it's really, I love those things. I'm obsessed with those, with the 560s. And I just bought a new, so I found another old original big knob Daking. Adam from War on Drugs had it. He wanted to get rid of it. So
He had it in a power supply?
He had it in a power supply, and he had it in a power supply, and he had the cables, obviously. So he had texted me that he was thinking of selling it, and I was like, dude, I want it. And so he just shipped it to me. I PayPal'd him, and I fucking love those things. I have like 7 now.
So you had space open, or you used his power supply?
I'll use his power supply, but I have 2 purple racks, and I'm just going to take something else out and put that in because I already have a 4 rack that floats.
Right.
And then I have 2 already in one of my purple racks, but I'll just put another one in there. I love using those for like guitars, bass guitar. Like they really sound great, and they kind of, even if you don't EQ much, they just make the sound bigger. You know what I mean? What comes out is always like 5 or 10% larger.
Right.
I mean, that's what I do on a lot of those Dinosaur Jr. records when I mix. I put them all, the guitars are all through the Dakings, you know. And
when you mix.
Yeah, when I mix. Well, I don't track those records anymore. Jay tracks at home with guys up in Amherst.
Uh-huh.
But even when I first got the Dakings, that's what I used to record guitars. So for me, it's like the API on drums, Dakings on guitars, both ends of the, you know, tracking and mixing. And I feel like it just gives it a size. But it's funny with Dakings and with like complexes, those are the 2 things that if I find them, even though I have like a lot of them, I still try to buy them.
How many complexes do you have?
I got like 6 now. So, and
you
you
have a complex.
I have a complex. Very good.
You have 6 complex.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're all over the place. I mean, one of them is kind of like for parts. And then I go back and forth between which one I like on my stereo bus, depending on the record, because I have 2 of them now. The thing is, I have my 2 floating racks that when gear goes down, I put another piece of gear in, and then it's constantly evolving on what's in there. Even though the patch bay is now incorrect, I kind of know where everything is. But I have a second Compex in, and I just A/B them to see what sounds better on each record.
Hurricane Sandy, you lost a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I lost like a ton of stuff.
So is that part of the reason why you're now really careful about making sure you have as much?
No, I was always obsessed with like Compexes. I've been just buying them when I found them since like 86 or 87. I just feel like they're not that, you don't see that many out there. And I don't know,
Are they making new, like,
they are
500 series?
Well, they do now. They're making a 500 series. They also did a reissue of the Compex. I think the guy in Vintage King is selling it, and it sounds really good. It's a little different for me for the stereo bus, but I use it. I have a new one, and I use it on backgrounds and room mics. It's great for crushing that stuff. But there's something about my old Compex, 2 of them at least, on the stereo bus that they just compress in a really musical way. And, obviously reissues are reissues. You can't always get them exactly the same. It's like the 1176 reissues and the LA2s. They just act different. They're usable and they're very good, but they just act different. So if you're used to a certain style of compression that you have with the original, you probably don't maybe get it so much with the reissue.
Yeah, I've noticed, because I have a Compex here, that they all seem to react differently, even the old ones.
They're all different, yes. That's why I A/B them.
Yeah.
They really like I'll start a record now. I forget whatever record it was 3 records ago where I switched to the second one that I don't always use, and it sounded really good. I was like, screw it. And then the next record I went back and forth, and I was like, oh, the original one is better. So yeah, it's they
have a personality.
They sure do. Yeah. They're like kids. They're all different and equally fucked up. they're like kids, but all but equally imperfect.
Noisy. Speaking of the Dakings, aren't we using Dakings to record right now?
We sure are. They're your Dakings.
They are my Dakings.
By the way, I'll give you $1,200 each for them if you want us, because I can use another 3.
I think if I recollect, if you look at the serial number on those, it's like number 2 and 3.
Right.
Because we got them right out of
the box, yeah.
Right out of Jeff's trunk.
Well, that was the funny thing about the Dakings, and I have the same thing with the Distressor, and it was like Water Music or something, but they just ended up, they were there. Or Jeff dropped them off there for me to check out or something, or us to check out.
Right.
And then it was immediately like call him and be like, how much? I'll buy them. And then the Distressor just ended up there. And I called Dave Durr and I was like, I'll just take it. And, that was one of the things I lost in Hurricane Sandy.
Was the Distressor?
The Distressor. And when I brought it back to him to see if he could fix it, he said no, but he was like, John, this is the 15th one I made.
Wow.
Yeah. So he kept it for his museum.
Wow.
But
you sent it back to him and he kept it?
Well, I brought it to him. I went over to Empirical Labs in New Jersey, and I said, I have this Distressor got messed up in Sandy. Can you possibly restore it? I've had it forever. And he brought it in, he opened it up, and he was like, it's not really fixable, but let me just keep it for the archive,
nice.
For because it was one of the first 20 he made. But no, we were on the Daking thing from the get-go. Yeah. But that's because we
were at Messina.
Yeah, we worked with Jeff. Jeff knew us, and that was when he was transitioning from engineering
to being a woman.
That's a really long and nasty for him, at least. No, but he was transitioning from engineering to design, right? Because that was when he sold the studio,
right.
And that was great. We were right on the tip.
And
they were great. He designed them based on Trident A range.
Right.
He really, they were big and heavy.
Yeah.
My favorite thing with Daking was Jeff was he when I bought the rack of 4, he said, "Oh yeah, it's portable. You can carry them through airports." And I picked it up and it weighed like 80 pounds. And I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
It's wheels on this thing.
Yeah. So it's heavier than a black box. But in a way, it was great to have them, because the power supply is built in the case.
Yeah.
So you just have to carry cables. So it is a really great design, but they were not totally transported.
Right.
You're not putting them in your overhead.
Right.
That falls out, it kills a lady. Breaks someone's neck. Yeah.
So if now that we've said that we use Daking on Gear Club, will he finally give us a discount on something?
No,
We're
but
waiting 25 years to get a fucking break from.
He will continue to discount us.
Right. We love you, Jeff.
No, we don't.
No. Okay, let's get some coffee.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us. Gear Club would like to thank today's guests and the folks that made today's show necessary. Our executive producer, Joe Lepton, Pete DeKilla, our technical director, musical director, Melef Lewis, and our legal counsel, the firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. And remember, all men and women are created equal. Heiser. And I'm your announcer, Bella Pearl and Yellow.
What are you guys doing? A podcast? What are you, seriously, what are you doing? Come on.